It's funny because there's been a lot of people who you've been compared to. I think when you came in, you were the bodyguard. There's obviously the Shawn Michaels and Diesel comparisons of you and MJF. But a lot of people who watch AEW who weren't familiar with you maybe didn't know what you were like in the ring. So for you to have that first match with Cody in the cage, I don't think people were expecting what that was. I mean, talk us through, that being your first match in AEW and, talk about wowing people who weren't familiar with you. I mean, it couldn't have really gone any better.
Man, it's a weird thing because I felt like as much pressure as that was and nerve wracking and, your first time on TV ever. And it's a cage match, Atlanta, Cody Rhodes. As much pressure as there was there, I felt like I was ready for that moment for my whole life, realistically. I felt like I could have walked off the graduation stage and right into a professional wrestling ring on TV. So I'm very confident in my ability, and it doesn't take away from the fact that that was the craziest night of my life. And I'll say it's still, it was like a blackout. I can barely remember anything from the match. It was so much pressure and it was so intense that it was seriously like I blacked out, went out there, did my thing, and then I came back and came to again. And I remember thinking, and I had the same experience my very first wrestling match on the Indies. My very first match, I remember coming back and just sitting there kind of confused because I was like, it was so much adrenaline that you don't even comprehend what just happened. It was like, was that good? Was everything all right? Was that okay? And M-Dog, Matt Cross, happened to be there, who I looked up to for years. And he was like, how long you been wrestling? And I was like, that was my first match. And he didn't believe me. He was like, that was your first match ever? I was like, yeah. He's like, I would have thought you were wrestling for 10 years. And I was just like floored by that. But I had the same experience with the cage match. I came back and I was just like, what just happened? Like, was that good? Was that bad? Like, what just happened? And from what everybody said, it was pretty damn good.
Because it's funny, Cody's come up twice now. He comes up when you coming into the company, then the cage match. How influential was Cody? I know obviously now he's with WWE, but how influential was he to sort of where you are now in AEW?
Yeah, Cody is going to be mentioned. I'm going to be mentioning Cody until the day I die. And that's just what it is. We're married, whether we like it or not, simply for the fact that, he was a very big part of me, getting my foot in the door. And obviously that first match, that was all him. He brought me in and he said, I'll work with you. And I'll never be able to thank him enough, and then behind the scenes, he was very much somebody I was extremely comfortable going to when it comes to real life stuff and real life advice and career advice. Cody was somebody, kind of like a father figure. And his presence is missed by myself backstage and probably a few others. And honestly, he's somebody I'm still going to call when I need advice. He's just that guy. I don't trust many people, but I do trust him.
Well, just a couple other things I want to ask you about. Obviously, when you and MJF were briefly in the inner circle, you got to be around Chris Jericho. What was the experience like of getting to wrestle Chris Jericho, getting to be around him? Because I assume you watched him on TV growing up and stuff.
Yeah, gosh, my whole life it seems. I'm so damn lucky to be associated or to have been associated with the people that I have already thus far. I mean, it's only been 3 years and I've gotten to work with the best in the world. Like
Mhm.
literally, you look at guys like CM Punk and Chris Jericho, and then I get to be under the learning tree of Billy Gunn and Arn Anderson, Dax Cash and Spears before Spears went crazy. I mean, have helped me tremendously. So being involved with Chris Jericho and associated with that was so surreal for me. One of those things you question, are we ever going to get there? And so it was nice to be there. But learning from Jericho has been huge, and he still gives me advice to this day.
I think, you brought up CM Punk a couple of times. You got to kind of be around him when him and MJF were in their feud. And then obviously there's that big moment in Chicago where he debuted. Did you ever think you'd see the day where you'd be working in the same company as CM Punk and then wrestling him?
No, I mean that's one of those ones that you threw away. Like, well, miss that opportunity. That's never coming. That wasn't even like a maybe. You know, so man, to be a part of something so monumental as the Punk return, to be in Chicago for that, and to be in the same company, man, I'll never forget that night. You just felt, you could feel it. It was a big deal, and you could feel that it was going to change things, and it has. Um, but yeah, it's very fortunate to be a part of the CM Punk return and to be able to have a match with him. I mean, that was one of the best nights of my life. That's one of my favorite matches, is my one against Punk. That it was just special.
And is he someone, because he seems like the kind of guy that he wants to come back, he wants to help younger guys. Is he someone who's backstage giving advice to people and trying to really help the company?
Almost more than anyone. It is. We are so lucky to have him in his mind, and the direction he gives and the advice and his vision of things is very special. And we are very, very lucky to have his mind, and his thought process and his ideas coming in, because it's helped a lot of people. It's helped me for sure.
Two last questions. One that's lighthearted, that I'm just very curious to know the answer to. You get compared to Batista a lot. Are you aware of these comparisons that you get compared to, and what do you make of the comparisons of you and Dave?
All right, so obviously very flattering. Um, I like to say, being compared to people's cool, but there's only one Wardlow, and I feel like you really can't compare me to many. Um, with that said, being compared to Batista is always going to make me blush, just because I was a huge Batista fan, and he is one of the best looking professional wrestlers to ever step in the ring, physique wise. Um, and he was one of the biggest superstars that wrestling ever created. You can count on one or two hands, the names that truly ran the company and were the top guy and were like true superstar status, like in in the media, in that demographic of like what's cool and exciting and mainstream. And now obviously going on to acting in Hollywood, not many people can do that. So to be compared to that is awesome, because that's what I want to be. I want to be one of those guys down the road that you can count on one or two hands. I want Wardlow in the name, in the mix when you're talking about Batista, when you're talking about John Cena, when you're talking about Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, you're going to be talking about Wardlow as well.
Well, listen, my last question is just, if when you, let's say when rather than if, when you beat MJF at Double or Nothing, and you
Yeah.
move on from him, it'll be the first time in AEW that you have not been in any way associated with him. How are you feeling about a post MJF Wardlow in AEW?
Post MJF Wardlow, oof, man, it's going to look different, huh? Gosh, I haven't even been able to think about that. Yeah, it's going to be weird. It's been 3 years. We've been married to each other. Post MJF Wardlow, I see it no longer being the MJF show. Because realistically it is the MJF show. Every week we see it. And I feel like I'm going to beat him so badly that he's going to be too embarrassed to even show his face on TV. And I think it's finally going to be Wardlow's world. And I feel like the opportunities are going to be endless for me now that once he's out of the picture.